He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast Vue with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi a better place to live, work, and play. You know, there's never been a more important time to celebrate leadership than now, as we're in this elongated response period, and we begin to have conversations with all these leaders in all walks of life who are really focused now on how do we get on the other side of this situation we're in a moment of recovery, so that we can have an economy again in coastal Mississippi that thrives and is healthy. And there's so much incredible work going on. We've been having conversations with many of them. You know, one thing that keeps coming up is the CARES Act. It came up in my conversation with Tish Williams. I gave kind of very high-level overview, and she talked about some of the applications to small business. It came up in my interview and conversation with Adele Lyons from the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber. It came up in my conversation with Paige Roberts from the Jackson County Chamber, and in my conversation with CEO John Harrison from Hancock Whitney. It's really important to all of us that this be implemented flawlessly, because it has a lot of provisions in there that are going to help protect paychecks and help keep businesses whole so that they can employ people on the other side of this. What I decided to do in the conversation today is to bring someone into the conversation who's done some research on the CARES Act and can help us have a better understanding of the details. In fact, there's actually two acts, and we'll explain that in just a second. There's actually more than that, but there are two that we're going to speak to today. So anyway, let me introduce you once again to Christy Pickering. Christy, how are you doing this morning?
I'm good. So nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Christy and I did an extended Coast Vue session together. She wrote an incredible book called Courage, has a great personal story to tell, and she also has a great professional story to tell. She started her own CPA firm in 1991 and serves on the bank boards for Mississippi Power and Hancock Whitney. She has a long history of involvement in the community, and the Coast Vue session that I had with her tells her whole story. But I couldn't help but ask her to come back to the conversation in this moment that we find ourselves in today and help me do a review of the CARES Act and some of the other issues surrounding that. We may even get into a discussion about some of the income tax ramifications. We may talk about the market a bit. But at the center of all this is really the CARES Act, and we're going to have that conversation now. But how are you doing? Isn't it strange, Christy, that we find ourselves in this unusual spot?
It is. We're all learning how to use Skype and Zoom and things like that.
We really are. It's going fairly well. We had a few issues in the beginning, but you think about Skype on top of each other's local Wi-Fi, and then it has to go into a production system that Kyle is managing, the producer of the show is managing, and then it goes out to YouTube and Facebook. There's a lot of technology layered on top of each other. So we had a lot of learning curve in the beginning, but it's going pretty smoothly now. So I appreciate you joining us via Skype. So we could do this in just a radio format, but we know that social media is really an important part of our show. People are sharing it, they're learning from it. And in this particular session today, if anyone owns a small business or works in a small business or just simply concerned about some of the elements of what it's going to take for us to get back up running again, this conversation today is going to have a lot of meat and bones in it about all of that. So you want to just hit the ground running, Christy?
Sure.
Let's do this. Why don't we do this? Let's talk about the law that was passed in March 18th of this year, actually just before the CARES Act was passed, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. Tell us about that.
Okay. That was the first shot at this by the government, by Congress, and it became law on March 18th of this year. It forces, and that's the word it uses, forces employers to provide paid sick and family leave to everyone who's affected by this coronavirus. This is what it requires, is that employers provide 80 hours of pay for full-time employees. And that is up to $511 per day, which would mean, 10 work days in 2 weeks. So a total of $5,110 per employer as a max, right? Based on their normal their normal wage. They also have to provide workers who are caring for people who are sick their normal pay while on leave up to $200 a day. So for 10 days, that would be a max of $2,000 per employee. So those are two things they must do for the first 2 weeks. And then also part-time employees of employers will also receive sick pay leave for the average number of hours they work for a 2-week period. So they would do a look back period. Now, I didn't get into the bones of what that look back period is. What they're saying on other legislation is through February 15th through June 30th of this year would be what you look forward. So I would think they would say that's 4.5 months, maybe 4.5 month look back period. Again, not defined yet, but
it also gives the provisions for when an employer or worker can take paid leave under certain circumstances.
Yes, and there are certain ways that you can get that paid leave. First of all, if you are subject to federal, state, or local quarantine, then you can get paid. If you were advised by a health provider that you need to self-quarantine because you're showing signs of the virus, that qualifies. If you're experiencing symptoms and you haven't been able to get to a care provider, to your doctor, or to be tested, but you have the symptoms, that makes you qualify. And if you're caring for someone who has the coronavirus. So those are 4 ways that you could still take paid leave from your employer.
So what's important for the employer to know is that there's a reimbursement process. Talk about that.
There is. They can get reimbursed. Now, this is for businesses with less than 500 employees and all public employers of any size. Okay. And the way it'll do, and it's a credit against your payroll taxes, and it is the employer's portion of payroll taxes. You have to go ahead and pay in the employee's portion because you withheld it from their wages, right? But the employer, the employer pays it. And then what I'm assuming is going to happen when they file their quarterly Form 941, where they pay their payroll taxes, I think there'll be a new line that says, here's where you ask for your credit, your repayment. And I think that's how that's going to work.
So what if I'm self-employed?
Well, if you're self-employed, then against your federal income taxes, you'll have to wait a little longer, right? But when you file your federal, your 1040, or your 1040 SR, when you file those forms, your annual tax return, you can take a credit on that return if you're self-employed.
Yeah, so there's been so much focus on PPP, the payroll protection plan, that I think some people may not have focused on that first law that was passed. So that's a good review. Any other notes about that before we move on to the CARES Act?
No, I just would want people to realize that is required of businesses, and you had to do that. You had to comply.
So let's talk about the CARES Act. I want to remind people that it was signed on the 27th of March. The president signed it, and the main purpose was to provide emergency assistance and healthcare response for individuals, families, and businesses. It also had a provision in there that helped the executive branch with appropriations for actually fighting the disease. So when you see the coronavirus task force and all the activities that are around that to get provisions to states and all this CARES Act helps provide the money to be able to do that. And it's a really important act. And it has an incredibly important part of it that applies to businesses around the United States. So let's kind of start from the top. It's $2 trillion right off the bat. And when you and I talked about this, some people refer to it as a stimulus package. Some people refer to it as a relief bill. It's probably a little bit of both because we're providing relief and trying to stimulate the economy to restart it once we get it off this current pause button. Any other comment about that?
No, I totally agree with you. It's a little bit of both. It really is.
So let's look at, there are 2 key provisions in here. The PPP is the one that a lot of people are hearing about. So let's talk about that one first.
Okay, and that acronym is Paycheck Protection Program, is what it stands for. And the differentiator between these two is for the PPP loan program, that is loans from the banks. You don't go to the SBA, you go to your bank for that. And those loans will be backed by the federal government through the SBA. So that's what that program is.
So let me say this. One of the things that was pointed out yesterday by Kim LaRosa is that there are actually some banks that are not doing SBA loans. So if you're currently working with a bank that doesn't do SBA loans, then you'll either have to go to another bank that does SBA loans, or you could go to a community loan fund like the Renaissance Community Loan Fund and talk to them. But I would, if you're caught in that no man's land, I would really encourage you to talk to Kim LaRosa's team at the Renaissance Community Loan Fund, because they can help direct you in the right direction. The one important thing about this, and we'll say it over and over again as we go through this conversation, is time is of the essence. So let me do this. We're getting close to the end of this segment. Why don't we'll take a break now? This is Christy Pickering, a CPA who's been in business since 1991, has terrific customers, serves on a couple of bank boards, and she's done an analysis for Coast Vue of the CARES Act, and we're gonna continue to work through this after we come back from the break.
Subscribe for free to the Coast Vue podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast Vue with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast Vue. We have Christy Pickering with us, a CPA from coastal Mississippi. I said going into the break she serves on a couple of bank boards. I definitely didn't mean that. You can't only serve on one bank board at a time. She serves on a couple of boards, Mississippi Power and Hancock Whitney. So she's incredibly well positioned to help us work through the provisions of the CARE Act. So when we went to break, we were just beginning to talk about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. So let's kind of cover that one.
Okay. This is available to businesses with 500 employees or less, also to self-employed individuals, and it covers 4 different things. But I need to stop here and say there are certain employers that have more than 500 employees that might qualify, but you'd have to go to the website and check it out with the SBA. But there are some ways that those employers could be included. So it includes 4 different types of costs: payroll costs, interest payments, lease payments, and utility service payments. Now, for interest payments, rent payments, and utility service payments, those obligations have to have been in effect prior to February 15th of 2020. So you can't just have gone out and gotten a loan now and have that qualify, okay? Or sign a lease now. It had to have been in effect beforehand, okay? And then the payroll cost includes gross pay, it includes medical leave, sick leave. It also includes employer-paid medical insurance. So those are the type of costs that are covered by this Paycheck Protection Program. There's a maximum amount for payroll of 2.5 times the business average monthly payroll costs. That's gross. The salary for each employee is capped at $100,000. Now, if you have employees that are making $150,000, the calculation is based on up to $100,000, no more than that. And the max for this loan is $10 million. And there is some flexibility on the maximum amount, or the 2.5 times. There's some flexibility on that, and you have to read the fine print on that. This loan, they will allow loan forgiveness. That's one of the differences in this loan and the other loan. There is a loan forgiveness portion of it, and it can occur up to the following amount: 8 weeks of payroll costs, the mortgage interest that you actually pay, the rent, and the utilities. For the period of February 15th, 2020 through June 30th, 2020. So for 4.5 months is the amount of time that you would have incurred these costs that you could apply for forgiveness. It has been suggested on some of the things that I've read, though, that 75% of these 4 types of expenses has to be payroll. I have not seen it in the SBA thing, but I've read things that are suggesting that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, one of the things that Kim pointed out yesterday is, and this is true, we saw this after Katrina, that when there's a new type of law that's never been done before, particularly if it has significant funding behind it, there are going to be constant adjustments in how it's administered, what's eligible, what's not eligible, what requirements are. It's just all going to be part of this ongoing compliance that has to be put into place so they can trace this stuff and make sure that they're measuring all loans against some standard. And she says those things are changing daily. It's just the reality of the situation. When you move fast in a situation like this, you want to do it as quickly as possible, but you realize you're going to have to clean some things up, and that's what they're working on now.
Right. It's very fluid. You have to just stay online with the SBA and look at what's changing. And also, there's only a certain pool, an amount that they can loan, right? Up to this what the portion that's in the $2 trillion package. So earlier is better. If you think this applies to you, then you need to file now.
Yeah, well, I guess, and she made this point yesterday as well, and John made it as well. But the reality is, there is a certain pool of money, a few $100 billion that are for this. That sounds like a lot of money until you realize that the entire United States economy is on pause right now. So there's going to be a rush for this money. And it will be interesting to see if they hit that ceiling and they have this number of businesses that have not been covered yet. How are they going to deal with that? I can't imagine they would just leave those businesses hanging.
Yeah, I think there'll be another round, but we don't know for sure. So
yeah, we don't know for sure. So it's better to act as if there will not be another round, and it's important to get in line as soon as possible. So if you're a small business, you should already know 90% of what we're talking about. But if you don't, that's fine. That just means you've been busy like everybody else trying to make ends meet and take care of your family. But hopefully we're prompting you to make some phone calls, and either to the Renaissance Community Loan Fund, to your bank, whoever you can get your answers from. Find someone who is administering, specifically is certified to administer SBA loans, and get the answers you need so that you can decide exactly how you need to move forward.
And I'd like to make 5 quick points on this loan, okay? The forgiveness on this loan can be reduced. If they look at your payroll from 2/15/20 through 6/30/20, and it is less compared to the prior year, same period, then they could reduce the forgiveness, right? Because you would have let some people go. The interest rate is 1% on this loan. You need to know that. That's a pretty great interest rate. It would be a 2-year term with no prepayment penalties, and the first 6 months of this would be deferred. So for 6 months, you wouldn't have to pay a loan payment. There's no collateral required or personal guarantees, which is right. And I want to caution people, when you do apply for this, be very, very, very careful. There are fraud penalties that could be charged against people who do not file it appropriately. So if you don't know the true numbers, use your accountant or your CPA. I'm not.
So there's a couple of angles. I've heard some really interesting conversations about this. So you've got the loan portion, and if you qualify for that, you can get that money at a very low interest rate, and you can just go forward. The moment you start to get into trouble here is when you start trying to do the PPP program. And try to, if you don't give them incredibly accurate numbers on that, as you work to make this a grant, and they discover that you fooled with this, I can assure you they're not going to take any prisoners on this. They're going to be very, very aggressive, because it means that you may have gotten some money that somebody else could have gotten. And a program like this, they want to be able to have integrity in the program, so that if we have another time, and there will be, something's going to happen in the future where we need a similar program, we don't want the politicization of this to get in the way of us being successful in the future. For example, there could be a small business that really has done okay, but he's going to try to get the grant, and then he gets the grant, then he goes and takes the money and goes and buys a big boat somewhere. That would be a red flag. And so the wonderful discussion I heard about that involved a scenario similar to what I just mentioned. So just be careful. There's no need to commit fraud here. If you need it, you need it. If you don't, the loan itself is a really generous loan, and you can use that to grow your business or do whatever you need to do to move forward. Any other points on that, Christy?
No, that's what I had on the PPP loan.
Okay, so now the next loan is the EIDL loan, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Talk about that one.
Okay. This loan is applied for directly through the SBA. Okay. And the loan size can be up to $2 million in this application. Small businesses can receive a $10,000 advance within 3 days of applying for this loan, and you do it online with the SBA. So you go to the SBA website. The interest rate would be 2.75% for nonprofits and 3.75% for other businesses. The term is 30 years. And the usage of the funds is pretty broad in this because this is a loan, right? And they say it's accounts payable, which would be everything a business owns, really, right?
Yeah.
Accounts payable, fixed debts, loans, payroll, and then it says other bills. So it's a wide swath of what can be covered here. So it's available, but again, it has to be applied for through the SBA.
So talk about the $10,000 advance.
Okay, again, within 3 days after you apply for the loan, they could send you the $10,000. You have to request it. They review your application and then they would send it to you. Okay.
So anything else about either one of those important programs as it relates to small business?
I just can't stress enough about doing this sooner rather than later. And again, making sure you have your numbers right. That's the two things.
So, you don't talk about your customers specifically, but I bet your customers have a lot of questions about this.
Oh, yes. I've been talking to some of my fellow CPAs as well, and we're receiving a lot of calls about this.
And CPAs and accountant have an important role in this process, don't they?
They do, and some CPAs are acting as agents to help there is a possible fee. I'm not doing that, but I'm too busy just with taxes right now. but I am counseling my clients about how to do it and where to go.
So Christy, let's do this. We're coming to the end of this segment. When we come back, let's talk specifically about the stimulus checks and how that process works and what the details of that are. I know a lot of individuals are going to be really interested in hearing that. So we have Christy Pickering, who is a CPA in Coastal Mississippi, and we'll be back after this break to continue the conversation.
Listen live or on demand and watch episodes of Coast Vue on your laptop, desktop, or on your phone or tablet by going to SuperTalkMSGulfCoast.com.
He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast Vue with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have the pleasure of having Christy Pickering, a Coastal Mississippi CPA, who is helping me sort of break it all down as it relates to the CARES Act, the stimulus checks that are going to be coming. We're actually going to talk a little bit about the market and what's happening in the market these days. A lot more detail than you would normally get from one of my shows, but the important thing is that there were lots of questions coming about this. We've been talking about it in various ways. Felt like it would be good to just kind of break it all down, which is what this show is about today. So we hope we're helping you, especially if you're a small business, that you're learning something about what you need to do and when you need to do it, which incidentally is quickly. And that's what we're hoping that you're getting from this message. If you know someone who needs to get a little bit of an education about all of this, pass the video to them and let them hear what Christy's contributions to this show are today. So anyway, Christy, when we went to the break, we were going to begin a conversation about the stimulus checks. I know that everyone's anticipating that, so let's talk about that.
Okay. The best news about this is that they will be tax-free. So when you receive your stimulus check, you don't have to pick it up as income on your 2020 tax return. That's good news. You have to have a valid social security number to get it. And the way that the IRS knows that you have that is a couple of ways. First of all, when you file your tax returns, right? So they're going off of the 2018 and 2019 tax returns. If you haven't filed 2019 yet, if you've at least filed 2018, then you would have a social security number for them to give you stimulus check. You can on your returns add bank account information, and that's been happening for a couple of years now. And if you put your routing number, your bank name, and your account number because you're paying through, a direct deposit, or you're receiving refunds through direct deposit, then they already have your bank account information. And if they have that, then they're saying within about 5 days, the middle of April, you could receive your stimulus check in your bank account. So look for it if that's you.
Wow.
Yeah, so that could be quick. And if you, let's say you don't file a return, let's say you receive only Social Security benefits, right? You're thinking, what do I do? Well, if you receive your Social Security benefits through a direct deposit, and you've already set that up with the Social Security Administration, then you're going to get your refund check that way, your stimulus check that way. I mean, it'll come that way. But if you're not doing that and you're getting a paper check, then you're going to get a paper check from the IRS, and that's going to take a little bit longer.
Okay. So let's talk about how much those checks are. Okay.
Adults will receive $1,200, and any children 16 and under will receive $500. Now, there's a gap there, right? You're thinking, what happens to children or people in college, 17 and older? If you can be claimed as a dependent on somebody's return, let's say you're still in college, but your parents are claiming you as a dependent, you will not, unfortunately, receive a stimulus check. Okay, your parents will, but you will not. And if you are a college student, or if you're 17 and older, still in high school, you won't receive a stimulus check because you're over 16. And if you're an individual who is an elderly person who is living with their children and being claimed as a dependent, they will not get a stimulus check, but everyone else will. So that's how that works.
Okay. So it's up to $75,000. They will get $1,200. What happens after that?
Okay. So yeah, let me explain how this works. So not everybody will get one if you make money over a certain level. Okay, so let me first talk about phase out levels. At the point that if you are single and you make $99,000, not single, $99,000, head of household, $136,500, and jointly file a tax return and make over $198,000, then you will not get a stimulus check. Okay. Now, if you were under 75,000 single, 112,500 head of household, and $150,000 and file a joint return, you'll get your full stimulus check. Okay. But if you're in between those two marks, the marks where you totally phase out and where you get the full amount, you will get a portion, but you won't get the whole stimulus check. So that's how that works.
Okay, good. Where can they go? Is there a website they can go to understand where they stand on that chart and how much they'll get?
Absolutely. I read something called the Kiplinger Tax Letter. It comes to me every 2 weeks. It's a really good periodical about the things that are happening in the tax world. You can go to kiplinger.com, and there's a thing that says, when will I get my stimulus check? That's where you type that in, and it'll take you, and it'll give you additional information about this. And let's say you didn't have to file and you haven't filed in 19, or you filed your returns, but you don't have any direct deposit information on it. You don't have your bank account information on it. You can go to the IRS website and go to getstimulusrefund.com. I'm sorry, that's the website. It's a part of IRS. Getstimulusrefund.com. And you can file your 2019 tax return on there. If you have a simple return, let's say you just have wages and interest or something like that, you can go ahead and file, add your bank account information, and get your stimulus check quicker. There is, however, a fee. The fee is $195. That would be taken out of your stimulus check. Now, if you don't want to pay that fee, you can go to some other providers, H&R Block, it's a very simple return, those kind of, preparers, and you could do it quickly that way too. But that's another way to get your stimulus check in a quicker manner.
So the good news is the money should start rolling pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
And hopefully people will, get their checks, either direct deposit or the paper check, in the next couple of weeks. And, that's going to help. It's going to help them meet some needs. And obviously, I think since so many checks are going out into the economy, it's got to help kind of bolster things a bit. So It's a form of stimulus in and of itself.
Absolutely. And as we talked about, I think they may be shopping online.
So I wanted to talk about pending legislation, but before we go there, let's skip that and go to income taxes and share a few things that relate to people's filing and so on about income taxes.
Okay. First of all, individual returns are due on April 15th, usually every year, but the IRS has extended that to July 15th. So that gets us all, takes a little pressure off. So we do have that extension and we can file those returns. Now, they also have not just extended the time to file, they've extended the time to pay. So you also get that breather for the time to pay without having any late payment penalties or late payment interest attached to those payments. So that will not be charged during that time period at all. So it's just a breather for all of us. It doesn't require that you file anything. You don't have to call your preparer and say, I need to file this extension. It's automatic. It's just happened. The IRS and the government knows that's the way it's going to be. It includes payments for example, your estimated tax payments that were due on April 15th, any income tax payments, trust returns that needed to be paid and filed, corporate returns that needed to be paid and filed. All of those were extended. The interesting thing, though, is the estimated tax payments are paid not really quarterly. It's April, June, September, and January is the way that works, right? Well, April was extended to July, but June has not been extended. So for this year right now, it would be June, July, September, and January is when you would make estimated tax payments. So that's a little weird, but so you may have to pay a payment in June. We'll see what happens with that.
Mm-hmm. So what about the state of Mississippi?
Okay, yes. So the state of Mississippi, however, has only extended those returns till May 15th, 1 month. Okay. So what I foresee is if we don't have another extension, then preparers like me will really have to get those returns done by May 15th because your clients are going to want to know what they owe for the state, right? So,
yeah.
So we're working hard.
So let's shift gears for a second and talk a little bit about the state of the economy and market reactions. And we'll take the rest of the time we have in this segment to just share some of your observations about what you're seeing. So just start at the top and give us your observations.
Okay. First of all, it's important for everybody to remember that the reason for all of this is the pandemic, right? Prior to the pandemic, prior to the coronavirus, the markets were doing well. The bank balance sheets were good. So it is a root cause of what's happening, right? So, and most analysts believe that as soon as the coronavirus starts to peak, that the markets will come back and we will start to see economic healing. Again, I don't know how long that'll take, but they think we'll begin to see it, right? The markets are incredibly volatile. Everybody knows that. But good news is the Dow is up 5% today, or at least as of about an hour ago, it was. So as of last Friday, the S&P was down 21.46%, though, from its mid-February high. So there has been a lot of downward trajectory for the markets, and we know that. But
so let's do this. I want to come back and we'll talk about the jobless market. We've got another jobless report out today, job report out today, and then talk about some of the bright spots. And then you've got a personal message you want to share. So we'll come back to that after this break, and we'll continue our conversation with Christy Pickering, a CPA from Coastal Mississippi.
You can also listen live to SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on your Amazon Alexa devices. Once you've enabled the skill, just say, Alexa, open SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast View with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. We have Christy Pickering, a CPA from Coastal Mississippi, with me today, and we've been talking about the CARES Act and the stimulus package and just lots of things. So I hope you've enjoyed getting some of these details. What I just want to say, and you can give your thought about this as well, but I think one of the bright spots in the economy is that if you look at what the Federal Reserve has been doing, you look at the market over the last couple of days, last few days, actually, you're seeing some of the volatility start to decrease. And what I mentioned to you offline is that when you think about the number of smart people around the world, economists, analysts, whoever, they're really looking at specific businesses, how they're going to be impacted, and all that's being factored into the market right now. And the market, so far, the last few days, has really responded positively about that. Anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I do think that there is a more positive outlook than there was, and they had kind of priced in a depression in the beginning, and they thought, well, maybe it's more like a recession,
Yes.
And so, but things are looking up. So, and I think we're seeing that.
So as I continue to say, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This will pass. We will get back to normal. And it may be a new normal, but the reality is the economy, and because Congress acted so swiftly, we've been able to bridge the gap, we hope, in appropriate ways that will help us stay healthy. So you had a couple of items you wanted to share about fraud. So talk about that real quick.
Okay, and scammers, and there are some things out there that are happening. So I want to make sure that people understand that these really are scams. I do litigation support work, so I do some work in the helping attorneys. But some people are offering investments, quote unquote, in phony cures. Don't believe that. I mean, make sure you look into those things before you invest in something like that. There is no cure right now. They're charging in advance for non-existent home tests. There are some online places where they'll say, we're selling you a home test, you pay for it and nothing comes. Okay, so be careful with that. There will be callers pretending to be the IRS or the Social Security Administration or SBA. And these are phishing scams where they're trying to either get your Social Security number, your bank account info. They're trying to get your stimulus checks. Okay. Mm-hmm. So be very careful. The government does not contact you by phone. Okay. Remember that. They contact you by mail. They don't contact you by phone and or by email or anything like that. So those are just things I want them to look for.
And what did you want to say about the Roth IRA?
Okay. Here is a way to make lemonade out of lemons. Okay. If you have a regular IRA where your investments have fallen quite a bit because of the markets right now, quite a bit. So for example, I had one that fell about 60%. Okay. What I did was I rolled that regular IRA into a Roth IRA. Right now, why is that a good thing to do? Because you're only taxed at what the IRA value is now. So I'm taxed at a much lower percentage, right? And I pay income tax in 2020 for rolling it over. But then when that growth comes back and when the dividends reinvest and it grows, I will never pay tax on it again, federal or state. So
wow.
It is a planning opportunity.
Wow, that's great. So I want to shift gear because I want to make sure we get this into this conversation. Christy, you wrote a book called Courage. You were involved in a 20-year abusive relationship, and you've been an inspiration to women probably all over the United States for your willingness to find your voice and speak out and help others. And one of the things that concerns you is that we're hunkered down now, and if someone is male or female, in an abusive relationship, they should not feel trapped. And what's your message to them? And then I have a closing statement about this.
Okay, yes, and that was one of my first concerns when they said shelter in place. The first thing I thought about is people who were sheltering with people who were volatile and abusive, right? And so my message is this to everyone: pay attention to your neighbors, pay attention to your family members. If you've seen some signs, stay in touch with them, at least via phone or Zoom or whatever, email, make sure they're okay. And just if you are in that situation, there are places that you can go to call hotlines. There are national domestic abuse hotlines you can call. Do not be afraid to ask for the police to call for help if something is happening.
And what's your website, which is a resource center on your website?
It's girlyoudeservebetter.com. So girlyoudeservebetter.com.
And you wanted to share, you have a quote that you shared with me. Share that with the audience.
Okay. I love this quote. I saw it the other day, and I just thought it was so perfect for our time right now. I think that when the dust settles, we will realize how very little we need and how very much we actually have. And we will know the true value of human connection.
Boy, we're getting an amazing lesson about that right now. I can't tell you how important that is. We can't shake our neighbors' hands, but we may actually see more of our neighbors today than we've ever seen. Because as I was talking about with Roger Wilder yesterday, we come back in and have when we get home from work, we shut our garage doors behind us and move quickly through our lives. Christy Pickering, thank you for joining us today. This has been an incredibly important conversation. And I want people to know that the Coast Vue session that I had with Christy will also be posted with this video, so you can go and see her inspirational story. And I hope that what we were able to share with you today, these details about the stimulus or relief package, will be helpful to you. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you, Ricky.
Have a great day.
You too.
Follow SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on Facebook, facebook.com/SuperTalk MS Coast 103.1.